In October 1980, the Learning Channel was founded. It had previously been a channel that was strictly available in the Appalachian region of the United States and played primarily educational, instructional, and health-conscious content. These programs took the form of documentaries about these various subjects, and while they were educational, they were also boring. The channel was regularly used in schools, with teachers often differing to these shows to amplify lessons and make their jobs a little bit easier. Despite its noble pretense, the channel itself didn't fare well when it came to ratings. At the time, it was one of the only academic educational channels that existed. But as time went on, the other networks made their own educational content and the ratings began to drop. Suddenly, there were shows that were entertaining as they were informative, and teachers began choosing to use those shows in class rather than the documentaries that often put everyone to sleep. As the years went on and the viewership kept dropping, the programming executives began to get desperate. They knew that if the ratings continued to decline, they would lose their funding and their jobs. And so, in 1998, they decided to make a shift in their content towards reality-based shows, like Trading Spaces and Junkyard Wars, and changed their name from the Learning Channel to TLC. It also helped that reality-based programming is notoriously cheap and easy to make, meaning that they were able to save money by doing less work. They maintained that these original shows and the channel itself was still based around educational programming. However, it was clear to see that this was not the case. Despite the shows having vague DIY instructional moments meant to educate the viewers at home, it was obvious that the main appeal of the shows was solely entertainment and competition. Despite the radical and swift shift in content, the network did better than it ever had before. These shows quickly garnered their own audience and set record ratings for the network. More people were watching TLC than had ever watched before, and it was clear what they wanted. The educational programming was quickly filtered out and replaced by more reality shows like John and Kate +8, Toddlers and Tiaras, and the Adam Carolla Project. People became obsessed with their shows, not because they were good, well-made pieces of media, but because they were trashy and showcased the grosser sides of life. They showed the weirdest and worst that the world had to offer, and most people watched in order to feel better about themselves. On many occasions, their shows were likened to watching a car crash. You simply couldn't look away no matter how grotesque it might become. How could those executives in 1998 know that by changing their programming block from purely educational content to trashy reality television to save their jobs and the network, that they would end up platforming a child predator and a family that worked incredibly hard to keep his disgusting actions hidden for years? Welcome to another episode of Dreading. Today we are going to go over the life and crimes of Josh Duggar, the reality star who was recently found guilty of owning child pornography. If you are interested in more of this kind of content, hit the subscribe button, as well as the bell icon to be notified every time we post. We also want to thank you for the surge of support on our videos, and recommend that you like and share this video as well, seeing as our content tends to be suppressed by the YouTube algorithm. With all that said, let us begin. The Duggar family first appeared on TLC in 2004 in a special titled 14 Children and Pregnant Again. The show was based primarily around Michelle and Jim Bob Duggar, two devout Baptists who live their lives according to their incredibly rigid belief system. This belief system includes things such as not believing in holding hands prior to engagement, the rejection of birth control as to allow God to determine the number of children you should have, and the restriction of television and movies, as they are seen as a corrupting force to the family structure. They also believe in the quiverful movement, which calls for a return to the biblical patriarchy, which from the name alone you probably understand is a movement that uplifts men by pushing down and subjecting women, which is exactly what it is. Biblical patriarchy has a firm set of beliefs, which amount to men being the heads of the household and women being their property to lord over and control. They are treated like livestock that is sold and traded, and there is an emphasis that they should be subservient to every man that they encounter, as they are lesser than them. Daughters are the property of their fathers until the time they are married, when they become property of their husband. This movement also states that women shouldn't be allowed to vote or receive any higher education, as they won't use that education and most likely will make the wrong choices when it comes to voting. Because of their firmly held belief system, When the Duggars first appeared on TLC, they were dealing with quite a few financial hardships. They had to rely on Jim Bob to provide for the entire family, but unfortunately, one paycheck doesn't amount to much when it's split 16 different ways. Because of that, the obscenely large family had a relatively small 3-bedroom home that was gifted to them from their church. Due to their poor financial situation, the home had only 2 bathrooms and the kids all slept in bunk beds, usually 2 to 1 bed, in order to make room for the rest of the family. They also adorned their kids in secondhand clothing that were ill-fitting, that basically looked like pilgrim attire, as the girls had to be fully covered as not to tempt the boys, because a boy having sexual thoughts would of course be the fault of the girls. The special focused on the family as Michelle prepared to have their 15th sibling and went over the odd system they had put in place to raise the plethora of children. They called this the buddy system. Basically, Michelle had raised her children to assist in the raising of their siblings, so she wouldn't be solely left in charge of over a dozen babies at one time. After giving birth, Michelle would serve as the infant's first buddy, taking care of them in the first couple of months of their life. Then, after enough time has passed, they would get their second buddy, which would be an older member of the family. That buddy would then take on the responsibility of taking care of the younger family member, feeding them, bathing them, and making sure they were properly cared for. This system would continue until the younger sibling was about 6 years old, when they would become the older buddy that would help their younger sister or brother. This led to the eldest siblings, especially the eldest daughters, taking the brunt of the responsibility in the home. It should also be noted that Jim Bob didn't participate in the buddy system as it pertained to taking care of the children. Rather, he was Michelle's buddy, and she would have to take care of him as well. Many people who watched the special found the Duggars to be fascinating and strange. They found their beliefs to be incredibly foreign, especially given that they went as far as to reject dancing, as it was seen as being too tempting to the men around them. Most people who watched the Duggars did so in a state of shock and morbid fascination, but regardless of why they were watching, which led to a huge rating spike for the network. The special did so well that 2 years later, TLC created a follow-up special titled Raising 16 Children, which further showcased the family as they moved into a rental van as they were building their new home. This was swiftly followed by 2 other specials, 16 Children and Moving In, and On the Road with 16 Children. The specials seemed to perfectly coincide with Michelle's pregnancies, as they seemed to get pregnant once a year, and as their family grew, so did people's morbid curiosity. Was this family real? Was she really having another baby? Why were they making their kids wear blue jeans to run a 5K race? So many questions. While the specials introduced the world to the Duggars, it was clear to see that the people over at TLC were purposely putting the family into entertaining, albeit uncomfortable situations as a way to mock and satirize them. The programming wasn't meant to indoctrinate people so they would become devout Baptists. Rather, it was the opposite. Most of the people watching did so in order to ridicule and deride the family for having their daughters' suitors fill out a questionnaire before being allowed to court them, forbidding them to higher education, and using the teachings of a man who advised parents to abuse their children when they so much as stick their tongues out. Each special garnered higher ratings than the previous one, with more and more people finding the Duggars and getting drawn into their lives simply out of fascination. The general feeling was not that people liked the family, especially Jim Bob, but they felt as if they needed to see where this went. They wanted to see what would happen to the kids, how they would turn out when they became adults, and could also think for themselves. And that fascination led to TLC greenlighting 17 Kids and Counting as its own reality show, which would later be rebranded as 18 Kids and Counting, and finally 19 Kids. However, since the beginning of the specials, the Duggars had been hiding a dark secret, a secret that they went to extreme lengths to cover up and disguise, a secret that has torn their entire family apart, and a secret that showed just how depraved the heads of the family are, and how little they actually care for their daughters. So let us talk about Josh Duggar. If you had watched any of the Duggars shows, then you would be keenly aware of who Josh Duggar is. On the shows, Josh was made out to appear as the ideal older brother, always caring for his family and looking out for his sisters. As previously mentioned, the Duggars utilized the buddy system while raising their children, meaning that oftentimes, after being weaned off of Michelle, Josh would be their secondary parental figure, in charge of getting them fed, dressed, and bathed. That is, until they changed the system so that the eldest girl would be in charge of that. His parents praised him for everything he did, and it was very clear to see that the family thought highly of him, and they wanted the world at large to think that way as well. The show painted Josh out to be a charismatic young man and deeply believed in everything he had been taught about his faith. But this outward appearance could not have been farther from the truth. In March of 2002, About 2 years before filming for any of the specials began, when Josh was 14 years old, he had on multiple occasions sexually assaulted his sisters, one of which was 5 at the time. He did this in a variety of ways, sometimes choosing to wait until they were sleeping, then creeping into the room to fondle them. While reading to his 5-year-old sister, who was sitting on his lap, he began to molest her, and in one instance, while another sibling was doing laundry, he began to assault them as well. His parents were well aware of what he was doing to his siblings, and took very little action. An action which in and of itself is a crime. According to Jim Bob, the first time they became aware of what Josh was doing was when Josh came to him in tears and confessed his sins to him. However, it would later be said that the actual first instance was when one of his daughters came to him and told him about the assaults. This would be when the Duggars would be living in their 3-bedroom home, with the kids having to share bunk beds. She informed her father of what had happened, and according to Jim Bob, he spoke with Josh, who admitted to the assault. At that point, Jim Bob stated he punished his son in a variety of different ways, the details of which he couldn't remember besides taking him to work with him. But ultimately, Josh was allowed to stay with his sisters, and the buddy program was still in effect, meaning that he would still be left in charge and alone with his victims, of whom the family was well aware he had molested. 9 months after his father had punished him in some unknown manner, in March of 2003, a year before the specials were to be filmed, Josh was once again accused of sexual assault, this time by multiple members of the family. He had done so at least 7 times, to multiple different siblings, both when they were awake and when they were asleep. According to Jim Bob, he had been made aware of each occurrence immediately after by Josh, and then punished him each time, again in ways he didn't quite recall, and put up what he called safeguards in the house to protect the girls. These safeguards clearly failed, as Josh was able to continue to molest his sisters in the home. Jim Bob, however, didn't remove Josh, or think of getting any help until the 7th complaint, this time by a girl who had been visiting the home and wasn't a part of the family, meaning he didn't think to take action until it was unavoidable. According to the Duggars, they went to their church elders and were advised that they should put Josh into a behavioral program that would help young offenders like him. However, Jim Bob soured at this idea, stating that he personally didn't want Josh to go to any programs like that, as he feared that his son, who was already a child molester, would be corrupted by the other offenders at the program and would simply learn how to offend better. In his mind, his son was a good kid, completely unlike the other children who would be in correctional programs for assaulting their sisters. It was also stated that he feared that Josh would learn things about the world that they had sheltered him from, so they refused to put Josh into that environment. Instead, they determined that they would send Josh away to a Christian program where he would be required to do physical labor while receiving counseling for what he had done. When they were pressed on the type of reformation program he was sent to, they buckled, stating that it was not a legitimate program or training center as they had maintained, but rather he was sent to live with a person in Little Rock who was remodeling a building, who would serve to mentor Josh. This wasn't an accredited facility. The man was not a licensed counselor. He was basically a family friend who needed some help remodeling. Josh stayed at his makeshift facility for 3 months, and then was returned back home where Jim Bob and Michelle determined he had been cured of all sinful proclivities and forgave him, putting him back in the presence of their daughters. They also decided to have a sit-down with an officer of the law to further confess his sins. According to them, they didn't know if said officer would report the crime, arrest Josh, and take him to prison, but it was important to them to have him confess what he had done. They brought him into the station, where they met with another family friend, State Trooper Joseph Hutchins, who then had a stern talking with Josh. Ooh. Joseph Hutchins was a family friend and a member of the church they went to. Jim Bob himself stated he knew Hutchins because he would come to the car lots which the family owned and operated, and inspect them as an officer of the state. Jim Bob's prior friendship with Joseph all but guaranteed that Josh's sexual assaults wouldn't be reported and were more for show than anything else. According to the Duggars, Josh bore his soul to the officer and told him about every instance where he had assaulted his sisters. However, when asked about this instance, Joseph Hutchins disagreed. In the statement he gave, he said that he was only told about one instance of inappropriate touching done by Josh, and the full extent of the assaults was not something he was made aware of. He maintained that if he had been aware of the breadth of Josh's crimes, he would have reported him to the state, as he would have felt it was his obligation as a state trooper. It should also be noted that years after this encounter with the family, Hutchins himself would be sentenced to 56 years in prison for owning child pornography, making his statement shaky at best. Regardless of what actually happened during that encounter, The Duggars nor Hutchins made a criminal report of what happened and allowed Josh to come back into the home after 3 months away, where they promptly began filming their first television special. Jim Bob and Michelle didn't make the network aware of what happened, and in fact, kept the situation incredibly quiet as to not embarrass the family or draw negative attention to them, as Jim Bob was a member of the House of Representatives and had further political aspirations that would have no doubt been soured by the thought of his own son being a sexual predator. It wouldn't be until 2015 that details of these assaults were made public, through the most unlikely of ways. Throughout the early 2000s, the Duggars were making rounds on different shows to promote their specials themselves. One of these appearances was scheduled to happen on the Oprah Winfrey Show. As promotional material and packages were released leading up to the appearance, one unnamed individual who knew about Josh's actions felt the need to speak up about the family. They felt as if the family was living a lie and trying to falsely advertise themselves to the general public, despite the fact that they had allowed their daughters to be abused by their eldest son. On Thursday, December 7th, 2006, this email was sent to the Harpo Studios prior to the family's appearance. Topic: question. Message: before you air the Duggar family from Arkansas with Josh Duggar, you need to know the truth. They are not what they seem to be. Josh Duggar has molested, redacted, while she was sleeping, and the parents have been hiding the secret for a long time. Jim Bob lies to his church and his friends to make him look good. At this moment, he is having trouble in the church for lying about Josh and things that concern the way the church members reacted. I think that you should know the truth before they make a complete fool of you and your show. They have been on TV before and come across as the perfect family, which couldn't be further from the truth. They jump from show to show to receive gifts for their family and to make them look really good too. Please consider this and confront them about their secret. After receiving this alarming email, the team at the Oprah Winfrey Show canceled the Duggar appearance outright, refusing to have them in the studio, and they contacted the Department of Human Services hotline and faxed the email over. This email then prompted an investigation by the Springdale Police Department, who, up to this point, had not been made aware of any criminal action taking place within the home. Before we go over the police reports in detail, it's important to note that Arkansas's statute of limitations on these crimes is 3 years. By the time the email was sent to the Oprah Winfrey Show and they reported them to the Department of Human Services, 3 years had already passed, and there was nothing that could be done about it. The statute also applies to Jim Bob and Michelle, who could have been charged for failure to protect their daughters. While we know that an investigation into the family occurred in 2006, that didn't become public knowledge until May of 2015, where In Touch magazine ran a story about Josh's incestuous proclivities. The magazine received a heavily redacted police report about what Josh had done to one of his sisters and publicized their findings, an action that would lead to a lawsuit as the record was supposed to be destroyed. Shortly after that, In Touch magazine found further police reports that showed that Josh had molested multiple of his sisters, as well as a babysitter who was not related to the family. We will be reading parts of these reports, as that is the only way to truly get across how heinous, deliberate, and methodical Josh's actions were. He did this multiple times to multiple relatives, the youngest of which was 5. Each time it occurred, he was well aware of what he was doing and that it was wrong. It's also important to note that Jim Bob and Michelle were made aware of the situation multiple times and ultimately chose to do nothing until they were forced to, when Josh assaulted someone who wasn't a part of the family. The Duggar family purposely hid these actions to protect him, as well as to protect their reputation within the church and profit off of their show. Because of their inaction, their daughters and another party were molested. On Tuesday, December 12, 2006, at approximately 9:45 a.m., James and Michelle Duggar were interviewed at the Children's Safety Center in Springdale, Arkansas. The Duggars had brought their children to the Safety Center to be interviewed in response to an allegation that had been received by an Arkansas State Police child abuse hotline. The allegation was in regard to one of their children, Josh. James said that in March of 2002, Josh, who had just turned 14, came to him very upset and crying. James said that Josh had told him that he had been sneaking into Redacted's room at night and had been touching Redacted on the breasts and vaginal areas while they were sleeping. Apparently, all the girls were sleeping in a common room at this time. Josh told James that this had occurred 4 to 5 times and had occurred once as Redacted was sleeping on the couch. Apparently, the girls had always been asleep when these incidents had occurred. James said that when they later told the girls what had occurred, one of the girls, Redacted, had said she remembered one time when she woke up and Josh was quote-unquote taking her blanket away, but she didn't remember anything else. James said that in July of 2002, Josh admitted to him that one night, as a female friend of the family was sleeping over, he had gone to the couch where she was sleeping and fondled her breast as she slept. This girl was later identified by James as Redacted. James said that they disciplined Josh after this incident. James said that about 9 months later, in March of 2003, there was another incident. James said that Josh was reading to his 5-year-old sister, and as she was sitting on his lap, he had touched her breast and vaginal area. James said that Josh then ran out of the room and called him and told him what he had done. James also said that sometime during this time frame, his daughter had been standing in the laundry room and Josh had put his hand under her dress. James said that after these incidents, he had met with the elders of his church and told them what was going on. James said that they all agreed that Josh needed to be put into a treatment program. James said that one of the elders was a chaplain at the Piney Ridge program at Vista Hospital. James said that they had concerns about the program at Piney Ridge because they felt that Josh might be exposed to other offenders and other things that they did not want to expose him to. James said that one of the elders was an ex-prison guard and told them that some of the programs for juveniles were finishing schools where juveniles learned how to offend from other offenders. James said that they found out about a Christian program in Little Rock, which they felt more comfortable with. James said that he could not remember the name of the program, but that it was conducted by a Christian ministry in the old Veterans Hospital in Little Rock, and the man who ran it was Harold Walker. James said that he thought that the program was affiliated with the Little Rock Police Department, since they had a station in the same building. James said that the program consisted of hard physical work and counseling. James said that Josh was in the program from March 17th, 2003 until July 17th, 2003. James and Michelle said that they were both comfortable that nothing had occurred since Josh went through the program in Little Rock. They both felt Josh no longer had any problem and that all had been resolved. The Duggars said that Josh had apologized to all of the girls in the family and that they had forgiven him. James said that several members of their church were aware of the situation and had been supportive of the family. I asked the Duggars if they knew how this had come up at the time. They said that at the time these things occurred, a family friend who was aware of what had happened had written down in a letter what he knew of Josh's actions with Redacted. That letter had been placed in a book and had subsequently been forgotten about. Just recently, the book had been loaned to someone with the letter in it, and the person who discovered the letter had called the hotline. The Duggars declined to identify who wrote the letter or who found out about it. I asked the Duggars if any of this had ever been reported to the police. James said that he and Josh had spoken to a state trooper after Josh had returned from the program in Little Rock. James said he knew Corporal Hutchins with the Arkansas State Police. James said he knew Hutchins because he used to be a car dealer, and Hutchins was a state trooper who inspected car dealers. James said that after Josh returned from Little Rock, he and the church elders decided to contact the police about Josh. James said that one of the church elders, he and Josh had gone to Hutchins' office at the state police headquarters, and that Josh admitted to Hutchins what he had done. James said Hutchins gave Josh a very stern talk about what might happen to him if he continued such behavior. Josh said that Hutchins told him that since he had already been put through a treatment program, there was nothing else to do. In the 33-page offense report that was written by the Springdale Police Department, one of the victims was interviewed about what had happened. For the sake of brevity, we will just refer to the victim as she or her, as the situation calls for. Investigator Taylor then asks if she knew why she was there for an interview. She then started to cry. Investigator Taylor handed her a tissue. She said that Josh did something to her 4 years ago. She said that she did not remember what he had done exactly. She said that all she remembers is that Josh was on the washing machine, and he picked her up and did something to Redacted, said Redacted was redacted when it happened. She said that she did not remember what Josh had done. She said Josh had stuck his hand up her dress, but did not remember what he had done. She said that she was later told that Josh had touched her while she was sleeping when Redacted. She said that Josh confessed to her that he touched her improperly. She said that he told her that he touched her on the chest and down there. Investigator Taylor asked how she felt about Josh being home now. She said that she did not totally trust Josh. She said that she still loves Josh, and she said that she does feel safe at home. We will link the full 33-page report in the description box down below. However, the veracity of the statements from Jim Bob and Michelle are questionable at best, as later, more testimony would come out that would prove that they lied to investigators. and had their children lie as well. In the various statements from their daughters, it is clear that they were coached or taught to believe that what Josh had done was not that bad, as he had apologized for it. They use almost all the same language, verbatim, when talking to the officers. And in the one example I just read, the victim states she doesn't fully trust Josh while crying, but also states that she feels safe at home. Unfortunately, because of the statute of limitations, the police were not able to act on the case. As far as they were made aware, the last assault had taken place 3 years prior, and so they closed the investigation. The Duggars did what they could to hide Josh's actions publicly, taking care not to inform TLC or other members of the church what had happened. But as we know, their dirty little secret ended up coming out anyways. After Josh's pedophilic, incestuous tendencies were made public, the viewers of 19 Kids and Counting were shocked. Again, Josh had been touted as the best big brother in the world, and the golden son of the family. His wedding to Anna Duggar had been a televised event, and people were shocked to find out that less than a year before filming their first special, he had been molesting his sisters, some of which were in the single digits at the time. This scandal also followed Josh working for the FRC, a group that lobbies against access to pornography, stem cell research, divorce, and the LGBT community. Ironically enough, he had been campaigning against the trans bathroom bill because he claimed it would lead to a woman being assaulted and molested by trans people, the same way he had been doing for years in secret to his own sisters as a cisgendered male. The day after the reports were published, Josh was forced to resign from the FRC, seeing as him being part of their organization was more than a bit hypocritical. His statement reads as follows: I deeply regret that recent media reports about my long ago past has brought negative attention to FRC action and its work to preserve and advance the interests of family, faith, and freedom in the political arena. FRC Action's mission to fortify the traditional foundations of civil society is more important now more than ever, and I'm heartbroken that any attention has been diverted from these noble causes to my wrong actions as a young teenager. I am so thankful for God's grace, forgiveness, and redemptive heart that allowed me to transform into a man of faith and testimony. In good faith, I cannot allow Family Research Council to be impacted by mistakes I made as a teenager, so I am resigning as Executive Director of FRC Action. I will continue to pray for the advancements of the causes we believe in, and I hope that in the days ahead, you will pray for me and Anna as we seek God to discover the next chapter of our lives in His service. Josh also released his own statement about what he had done, claiming that these actions were far in the past and were already forgiven by his family and by God. 12 years ago, as a young teenager, I acted inexcusably, for which I am extremely sorry and deeply regret. I hurt others, including my family and close friends. I confess this to my parents, who took several steps to help me address the situation. We spoke with the authorities, where I confessed my wrongdoing, and my parents arranged for me and those affected by my actions to receive counseling. I understood that if I continued down this wrong road, that I would end up ruining my life. I sought forgiveness from those I had wronged and asked Christ to forgive me and come into my life. I would do anything to go back to those teen years and take different actions. In my life today, I am so very thankful for God's grace, mercy, and redemption. It is clear in his wording that he believes that the controversy is over nothing, and that his past actions should not be used against him in the present. These statements, along one from his parents and one from his wife, did little to assuage the public backlash. TLC had been wanting to gauge the reaction before making a decision, given that 19 Kids and Counting had become their biggest show. However, the very next day, it had become clear to them that they couldn't continue to appear to support Josh and the family, even though they didn't necessarily want to cut ties. They then released this statement. Effective immediately, TLC has pulled all episodes of 19 Kids and Counting currently from the air. We are deeply saddened and troubled by this heartbreaking situation, and our thoughts and prayers are with the family and victims at this difficult time. They were careful not to outright say that the show was canceled, as they still wanted to wait and see how the public's reaction would be over time. They spoke to the Duggars privately and advised them on how to move forward, and hoped that in the coming weeks, the tide would turn back in favor of the family, or at least away from Josh. Their hope was to eventually continue filming with the family after the controversy had died down. And while Josh's actions against his sisters deserve outright condemnation, and his father's attempts to protect his son's reputation over his daughter's safety is deplorable, the family and Josh weren't without supporters. Mike Huckabee, the governor of Arkansas, released a statement in support of the family, stating that while what Josh did was inexcusable, it wasn't unforgivable. He emphasized that the real villains in this story were the people who were talking about this and condemning the Duggars for their inaction. action because they weren't being understanding towards them. He implied that the media's actions were somehow worse than Josh's, as if reporting on a crime is the same as committing it. He also inadvertently stated that incest and molestation are just part of growing up, and that most minors do that, which is extremely alarming. His statement was later deleted. In an effort to save their reputations, Jim, Bob, and Michelle decided that they would go even further to defend their son's actions. Oh my God. And do an interview with Megyn Kelly. Throughout the interview, Jim Bob makes it clear that what his son did wasn't that bad, because he didn't technically rape or really assault anyone, as he only molested them over their clothes. That this was something he had heard was normal for boys Josh's age, and that though it was shameful, it wasn't condemnable. He repeatedly made mention that Josh had simply touched his sisters over their clothes, and that it wasn't that bad, despite the police report indicating multiple instances where he would put his hands under his sister's clothes, including when he molested his 5-year-old sister. They went further to state that what had happened so long ago, it shouldn't affect how people see them and Josh today, and how they did everything they could to protect their daughters, even though the only punishment they were able to definitively say they gave Josh was to bring him to work with his father. The interview did not go over well. The people who had been following the Duggars because they looked up to the family felt betrayed and lied to, and the people who had been hate watching them or watching them for the spectacle felt disgusted. Their plans to save their reputation and save the show had backfired, while people stating that they clearly prioritized their son's reputation over their daughter's safety. TLC, who had been waiting to see how the scandal would resolve itself, then made the decision to cancel the show outright and released this statement. TLC has been especially concerned for the victims in this situation, including the Duggar family. It is our hope that this effort will help those in need learn where to turn for information and help. At the same time, the network announced they would be making a 3-part series on the other adult Duggar siblings, called Counting On. The show would be virtually the same as 19 Kids and Counting, and the key difference being Josh's uninvolvement. Last December, one of the Duggars' former bodyguards did an AMA on Reddit, where they discussed what it was like working for Josh and the family during this time. According to his testimony, Josh and Jim Bob were uncomfortably smug and unbothered by the incident, with Jim Bob introducing Josh as the man of the hour. Josh assured everyone that this was an issue that had been dealt with and wasn't a problem anymore. However, he was incredibly touchy about his phone and laptop being handled or used by other parties. The bodyguard also recounted Josh's borderline obsession with porn, recalling a day in which he was driving behind Josh to work, and Josh had his phone mounted on his car's dashboard window, playing hardcore pornography for everyone to see. Publicly, it seemed like things could really only go up for Josh, because you can't get much lower than being exposed for having molested your siblings. He and his family felt that eventually people would forget, and he would most likely be welcomed back into the fold and onto the show, seeing as he was still present in their daily lives. However, something would happen that would once again thrust him into the spotlight and somehow make everything worse. A few months after the molestation scandal, Josh was exposed for having made 2 separate accounts on the website Ashley Madison. Ashley Madison was a site that helped married men and women have affairs on their partners discreetly. Their motto was, "Life's short, have an affair," and they guaranteed their site's anonymity, ensuring that no one would find out about said affair. The site has been the source of countless scandals, with the majority of the female user base not being women seeking to have affairs, but sex workers, using the sites to get clientele. Josh had not only created an account on the site, but signed up for the guaranteed affair package, which ensured that he would have sex with another party or get his money back. Josh never got his money back. He spent nearly $1,000 on the site and was exposed when the hacking group, the Impact team, stole Ashley Madison's user data and published it online. According to his profile, Josh stated he was looking for a woman who was professional and well-groomed, stylish and classy, casual jeans t-shirt type, muscular fit body, petite figure, tall height, long hair, short hair, girl next door, naughty girl, sense of humor, imagination, creative, adventurous, relaxed and easygoing, aggressive, take charge nature, confidence, discretion, secrecy, good listener, good personal hygiene, average sex drive, high sex drive, dislikes routine, had a secret love nest, disease-free, drug-free, natural breasts. It was also found that Josh had an OkCupid account that was attached to the email he used for one of his Ashley Madison accounts. According to this profile, Josh once again asserted that he was looking for casual sex and was open to talking to women between the ages of 19 and 35. He used another man's image for this account and was later sued by said man, as Josh's use of his image and likeness kept him from getting work, as it appeared he was part of a sex scandal. This only furthered Josh's negative reputation, and once again, he was forced to respond. He wrote this on his family's website: "I have been the biggest hypocrite ever. While espousing faith and family values, I have secretly, over the last several years, been viewing pornography on the internet, and this became a secret addiction, and I became unfaithful to my wife. I am so ashamed of the double life that I have been living, and am grieved for the hurt, pain, and disgrace my sin has caused my wife and family, and most of all, Jesus, and all those who profess faith in him. I brought hurt and a reproach to my family, close friends, and fans of our show with my actions that happened when I was 14 to 15 years old, and now I have rebroken their trust. The last few years, while publicly stating I was fighting against immorality in our country while hiding my own personal failings. As I am learning the hard way, we have the freedom to choose our actions, but we do not get to choose our consequences. I deeply regret all of the hurt I have caused so many by being such a bad example. I humbly ask for your forgiveness. Please pray for my precious wife Anna and our family during this time." In his previous statement about how he molested his sisters, he emphasized repeatedly that his actions when he was a teen do not represent him as an adult, that he had since learned and changed, and no longer lusts in that way. Anyone who supported that mindset had to now confront the fact that he had recently, within that very year, been going against his own beliefs and what he was preaching publicly. His morality was once again called into question, and it became clear that he would have to be distanced from the family brand permanently. Shortly after, a porn star by the name of Danica Dillon also came forward, discussing how Josh had had sex with her on 2 occasions while married, and how he had abused her during those encounters. She later went on to try to sue Josh for emotional and physical distress. Josh denied these claims and stated that he would be fighting these charges, as they were false. He made a statement saying that he would only consider backing down if Danica, real name Ashley Johnston, would publicly apologize and admit she made up the whole ordeal. However, in May of 2020, the lawsuit was settled out of court. It is widely believed that Duggar paid Johnston an unknown amount of money to drop the case, and she was not allowed to speak on the details. With Josh's repeated indiscretions and his clear inability to hold himself to any standard, many fans felt as if they were waiting for the other shoe to drop. And unfortunately, in 2019, it finally would. Despite all of his scandals, Josh's wife, Anna, stuck by him. It was seen as morally wrong for her to leave him, despite his numerous indiscretions. In order to move forward with the marriage, though, and deal with the porn addiction that Josh had previously stated he had, Anna and him decided to use the program Covenant Eyes. This program was usually used by religious families in order to monitor their children's computer and make sure they aren't viewing impure media. The program works by monitoring one's phone or laptop to make sure they don't come into contact with porn, blocking various porn sites, and reporting your activity to your friends and family. In Josh's case, Anna, his wife, would be the person getting his report. The program had been installed on Josh's home computer, work computer, and phone, meaning that the details of everything he would search and watch would be sent to his wife. However, Josh didn't want to stop looking at porn. He didn't want to be accountable to his wife, and I am sure that he felt as if doing so was somehow emasculating, given that he had been taught that women come second to a man in marriages. It is only her duty to be subservient to him, and that if he strays outside the marriage, it's because of her shortcomings, not his own. In conversation with a friend from church, the topic of Covenant Eyes came up, and Josh was made aware that there were ways around the system, ways in which he could still access porn without alerting his wife. After discussing this with a friend for a short while, Josh installed a Linux partition on the hard drive of his work computer. This allowed his hard drive to be sectioned off, with one section having the Covenant Eyes program running, reporting his actions to his wife, while the other section could fully bypass the program and allow him to look at porn. This also allowed him to access the dark web, the portion of the internet where child porn is bought and sold, as well as other illegal dealings. Since his scandals, he had begun working at the family's used car lot, where he spent the majority of his time alone in the office. This lot wasn't particularly busy, but it was just another form of income passed down by the family generation to generation. The next day, May 14th, 2019, Josh sent a text to his wife, stating he was stuck at the car lot due to work. This was a lie, as 1 minute after he sent that text, he was on his computer accessing the dark web, searching porn sites associated with rape, and child sex abuse. The next day at 11:15 a.m., Josh sent a text stating that he was once again at the car lot, only to 30 minutes later be accessing the dark web once more, downloading files associated with child sex abuse. At 5:08 that same day, Josh sent a text to his wife once again, stating that he would be stuck at the car lot until around 6 or so, working. This again was a lie, as he was downloading 3 files from the dark web, including 65 images of children being sexually abused. The next day, more photos were downloaded, and a photo was taken from Josh's phone around that time of his desk. In that short time frame, Josh had downloaded more than 200 files related to child porn on his computer. He had attempted to download the infamous Daisy Destruction video, one of the worst child porn videos of all time, made by Peter Scully. While Josh had been downloading child porn rapidly, he had unknowingly shaken hands electronically with law enforcement, who were tracking predators. The dark web utilizes what is known as peer-to-peer sharing, which is commonly used on sites like Napster and Pirate Bay. It makes use of a distributed application architecture that partitions tasks or workloads between peers. This allows people to share files directly with each other, usually illegally. Josh had unknowingly connected with law enforcement on the dark web through his peer-to-peer sharing network, and through his IP address and digital thumbprint, they were able to track the location back to the car lot where Josh had been working. From that alone, they were able to obtain a federal warrant to search the lot and its computers. 7 months after the initial download, federal agents raided the car lot where Josh was working. The agents spoke calmly with Josh, letting him know that he was still free to leave if he wanted, as they were just looking for evidence in digital contraband. They assured Josh at that time he wasn't in trouble, as they were just following a source. Josh himself was incredibly calm and hung back, allowing the FBI to scour his office as he stood to the side. After a bit, an agent asked if he could speak with him, to which Josh replied, "What is this about? Has somebody been downloading child porn?" Which is a curiously stupid thing to say if you haven't been downloading child porn. The following is the interview that the FBI had with Josh that day on the car lot. Up until this day, Josh has been able to get away with everything in his life. He has been able to smirk his way out of most of his problems, and he has had the backing of his famous family to fall back on. Because of this, and the fact that he has already gotten away with some of the worst crimes imaginable, he is confident that he will be able to do the same here. He is calm and measured, and though he doesn't realize the severity of the position he is in, he maintains an air of smugness throughout, because at no point does he think he will actually go to trial or be found guilty of this. He believes he has won before the case has even started.
What do you do for work?
I own this business, and then I also do some real estate as well.
Okay. Wholesale. What's this wholesale number card? What do you do? You got your real estate license?
I do not. No, we manage. My dad has commercial properties, so I help him with management of that.
Okay.
I dabble in a lot of things. This is probably my primary income as far as that goes.
Okay, I got you. And how long did you say that you've had this here?
We moved here in June of last year, I believe it was.
Mm-hmm. So June here at wholesale?
Yes.
Okay. And your internet provider?
Is Ozarks Go.
And how long have you had them?
I don't exactly remember.
And do you guys operate on like a Wi-Fi here, or?
So, yes and no. We've had several different things. In fact, last week I changed it because we had I think there's 3 routers in there right now. I honestly can't remember. But we had it daisy chained to where we had different, so we could send it out over the lot so we could get to each edge to be able to take pictures and things like that and post them up. Because our cell service is not real great down here in the valley. So, but I think I probably have 2 routers in there hooked up. One's more of a long range and one's closer up.
Okay. 2 routers. And are they password protected or secure?
I believe one of them is. The other one I think was more like a guest network. But I think that's why I've got them separated right now.
Okay. Right.
And yet last week I changed the configuration on the router because the one was open. The one that said the main one up where actually the modem comes in.
Uh-huh. Okay. And you said you didn't have very good cell service here, huh?
Well, depending on the provider,
Who do you have for your cell phone?
AT&T and Verizon. Well, I have Verizon, but we've had both.
That's on your personal phone? Or?
Yes, on my personal phone.
Okay. And what's that number?
479-200-2681.
Okay. And you said AT&T on another one, or?
I don't have any. I used to, but AT&T is I know there's, and then Sprint is, we can't really get any signal here for them.
Okay. How long have you had Verizon?
I don't know. I don't recall.
How about in your residence? Electronics there?
Electronics? What do you mean by that?
Like computers, phones, other phones, anything like that?
I mean, my wife has a phone, but not any more that I possess.
Okay.
I mean, I have in the past, and I've recently upgraded my phone. So, I mean, as far as that goes, I don't want to.
All right. Email? You got email accounts?
Yes.
What would that be?
So my email is joshuaduggar@icloud.com. It's my full name.
Sir, if you don't mind, we go back real quick to those electronics. I know Agent Accorda mentioned in your home residence, but for the reason of why we're here today, what are we talking about? Electronics on scene.
Okay.
So you have your cell phone, right?
Right, my cell phone, and then there's a laptop in that RV over there.
Okay. No, let's do one by one. The phone, that was one that you had in your pocket, right?
Right, in my pocket.
Who else has access to that phone?
Well, depending on who's. I mean, sometimes I have a guy that works with me. He'll take pictures. Sometimes with the phone.
So outside of you, other people will possibly have. Is it password protected?
Yeah, it's not very secure. I mean, everybody knows it.
Okay.
My kids use it quite a bit. My wife, mostly family and
Gotcha.
friends.
Is it
it's
a
not
swipe
like I would hand it around.
passcode, or is it a PIN numeric?
It's a PIN.
What's the PIN number for it?
Am I required to give that to you?
You're not. But,
Okay, I'd rather not.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll get a little bit more into the forensic side of stuff.
No, that's fine.
You said a laptop. That's the one in the RV, right?
Yes.
So
it is password protected as well.
Is that yours?
Yes.
Who else would have access to that?
Same kind of deal. We use it for kids watching movies, browsing online, whatever.
Okay.
It doesn't get used all that much.
But it is password protected?
Yes.
Just one password or multiple?
Well, so it's password protected in the fact that if you log in, I think it'll automatically log you in. But if you're, if you go to, it sits idle, it'll lock up sometimes. Okay. I don't know exactly how I have it set.
But in terms of ownership, that is your laptop, and in terms of the phone, that is your phone.
Yes. Yeah.
We noticed inside of the whatever, I don't know which one is your office, but the one over here that has the open sign, that there was another computer in there.
Yes, so that's an HP. That computer is it's now password protected, but pretty much the guys that work here are the ones that use it.
Okay.
And so there's different.
So there's currently a password on it right now?
Yes, there is. Yeah, and the password's written. I mean, I have it written around so the guys know. So it's not like, it's just mainly to keep somebody from breaking in and accessing files.
Oh, no, I understand. Right.
Whatever.
And so, computer in the office, laptop in the RV, your cell phone, and then your coworker's cell phone.
Yeah, and then there's also, they reminded me, there's a hard drive probably in the security system, which is up above.
Oh, for your surveillance?
Right, for surveillance system.
But you only use that to recover?
It's not active right now. I mean, I didn't tell anybody else that, but I'm just saying.
Well, I promise, we don't plan on breaking in.
No,
so
I'm just saying it's,
we won't give up your secret. How long for your cell phone? How long have you had that?
I bought it probably a week after it came out, the iPhone 11.
So guessing, I don't need an exact day.
2 months, maybe.
2 months ago?
3 months. Yeah, 2 or 3 months.
All right. What about that laptop?
The laptop I've had for probably 5 years.
5 years, and that's the one that's in the RV?
Yes.
All right. What about the desktop that's in there?
The desktop, I think I've had that for 2.5 years, 3 years, something like that.
And then that hard drive, if you can remember.
That's probably 7 years, maybe. It's an old one.
Okay. That kind of helps us narrow things down.
Right.
So what?
I don't think there's any others in there. I mean, honestly, I can't remember. I might have an old phone laying around or something somewhere.
In the RV
Who
or in the
knows?
office?
I know there's an old phone in the back of this Honda, but we found it in the car. It's not like it's in the car.
What about any other type of? Now, when we talk about electronics, I know a lot of people often just jump to cell phones, tablets, laptops, things of that nature. But also electronic devices that store thumb drives.
So there's probably more than one thumb drive in there. I don't know how many in the office.
You're pointing at this one on the right?
In the office on the right. There's also two cameras in there. Both of those have the ability to record, I think, on them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if any of them actually have any SD cards or anything in them. I don't know.
Right. And those thumb drives, are those yours? Are they your co-workers? Or?
I don't know. I don't actually know, because I don't think I have it. There might be one in that laptop bag as well. But they would all be, I mean, if they're here, they're here. I don't know. We find stuff in cars all the time.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah. I mean, we find it, when he's cleaning underneath the seats, he'll find money. I mean,
you name it, huh?
Yeah, pretty much everything. I don't want to say everything we find, but
so that's more of a lost and found of thumb drives that's in the office right now.
Right.
But then the one
we may have wiped some of them and used them because we do car photos mostly is what we're doing.
Right. So, and I know Agent Acock had kind of alluded to the fact that what we do, but we're part of a specialized task force, and that task force is called the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force.
Yep.
Based on an ongoing investigation, we were able to directly connect, actually one of our task force affiliates in the Eastern District was able to directly connect to a certain IP address that was participating in the uploading and sharing of known videos and images of child pornography.
Okay.
That information was then sent to us because the IP geolocated back into the Western District, somewhere in Northwest Arkansas.
So it was transmitting or receiving?
At this point, probably best that you just listen, okay?
Okay.
We were able to get from this IP address one specific video of child pornography and one folder containing approximately 65 images of child pornography from a specific IP address. We then, once that information was turned over to us, because of the fact that it was geolocated in Northwest Arkansas, we served a federal summons for that IP address. That IP address came back to Ozarks Go with a subscriber of Joshua Duggar with cell phone. I'm assuming that's personal cell phone. With that email address that you just mentioned. Now it came back to a PO box. We kind of briefly talked about this when we got on scene. So their service address from Ozarks Go has you at this lady's house down the street.
Well, that's where it is. Okay.
That's where it is, because Washington County property records have not updated or separated your land from this lot. So your actual physical address, which we had to find out, and Ozarks Go does not have, they've corrected now because this poor lady keeps getting your mail, as to what it is right now.
Okay.
Based on all that information, we were able to determine that this was the business where downloads of child pornography had occurred.
Okay.
It came from, or it occurred on two separate dates, which are believed to be approximately May 14th and May 15th of 2019, through a uTorrent software. And that's why I was asking you earlier to make sure we understood or we're on the same page with what TOR is, Tor, and what torrent is. And everything, again, was at the late night hours, I'm going to say roughly from what we can guesstimate, between 10 and 11.
Okay.
So based on all that information, a federal search warrant was obtained for the property and everything on it, to include the RVs, office, and vehicles, to find out or look for electronic devices that possibly were responsible for those downloads or uploads of child pornography.
Okay.
That's what's gotten us here today. And that's why you can see some of our questions were tailored around electronics, who has access, who has ownership, knowledge of certain softwares and forensic or peer-to-peer groups. And, at this stage, all we're trying to do, and I'll tell you this, I didn't know much about you leading up to this until I did, some research in the last 2 weeks. Man to man, I don't know how you do it. It is amazing to me what the media is putting you through on a daily basis. All because of stuff which would be considered speculation by most parts. We don't want to speculate. That's why we came here. We tried to be as courteous as possible and have a one-on-one or a conversation to figure out who's doing this on this lot, because these are not actors and actresses that are in these videos and images that we know came from here. Okay? These are somebody's little boy, little girl. At the end of the day, that's our main objective, is to find out who's doing it so that we can, or what electronic devices is being done on, so we can get those devices and take these images back off the internet so that these kids aren't re-victimized.
So they're being, yeah, I guess I have quite a few questions about it, but I don't know, how much you can divulge, but I'm curious, you're saying there's images being uploaded or images being downloaded?
That the IP address from this lot had child pornography associated to it in a peer-to-peer software program. And our task force affiliate was able to download that video and images from the folder of the IP address linked to this, this thing. Well, that's one of the things too, and I know Agent Aycock had also spoke about this briefly. Those individuals you see walking around, we didn't just decide to wake up this morning and come here. So we did our homework, and we've been doing this for almost a decade now. We're pretty good at what we do.
I appreciate the work you guys do.
Thank you. But these forensic guys are some of the best in the country.
That's
great.
What
they do is they take electronic devices and they, through third-party software, or through certain forensic software, without altering or deleting anything that's on those electronic devices, can go in and see a digital fingerprint of anything and everything that's ever happened. So if there's an electronic device, and that's why we're trying to get ahead of the game, if there's an electronic device that possibly might have this video or images or anything associated like that's on it, we'd like to know now, because once we leave here today, it's kind of the end of our conversation, and we wrap everything up, and then we don't have anything else to go on other than, no, I don't know anything about it, and then we see it, and it's like, okay, well, we had an opportunity to talk about that.
Right.
Why wasn't it addressed then?
Right.
You see what I'm getting at?
Right.
But as long as you're confident that there's no, or at least...
Because I don't want to be... I've watched my friends, answer things, and they get them for conspiracy or for something, and I'm not... I know the federal statutes are broad, and there's a lot of things to it, and I'm not going to say anything that's going to...
We don't...
incriminate me or anything at all. And I don't want to... I'm not... I'm not denying guilt, and I'm not saying that I'm... as far as anything goes, I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Right.
I'm not denying guilt, and I don't want to say the wrong thing. In instances where a person has been falsely accused, you usually find said person emphatically denying guilt throughout the questioning process. If any speculation or accusation is even implied to be turning their way, even subtly, their usual response is offense and to demand clarification. However, Josh outright states he is not denying guilt, which, along with his question of if someone had been downloading child pornography there, would immediately alert the officers to his guilt.
At the end of the day, you need to protect yourself.
Yeah, I don't want to say that I'm guilty or not. I'm just not saying, on accessing inappropriate content at some point, at any point in my life.
We are trying to figure out what led us to this business.
Okay.
That's going to involve stuff that's been either uploaded or downloaded onto the internet. And I know Agent Aycock had mentioned just now a while ago about uTorrent files. Well, we'll play this out question by question. You tell me what you feel comfortable with. Do you know or do you remember Napster back in the day? Napster was a file sharing program where millions of users throughout the world could get online and download music files. So if I had an entire album of, say, Garth Brooks, I could upload it into Napster.
I'm familiar. It was probably a little before my time, but yeah.
I'm showing my age.
Familiar with it.
Come on.
But that's
31.
Yeah, well, I'm 41, so you got me. But that was what was called a peer-to-peer file sharing network, and now it's evolved over the years. It's turned into where these particular programs not only share music files, but they share video files, software programs, documents, you name it. Are you familiar with, or do you know anything about peer-to-peer file sharing networks?
I'm familiar with, I guess you could say.
Okay. Have you ever used, or do any of these electronics currently on the property have any of those types of software downloaded onto them?
Yes.
Okay. Which devices are we talking about?
Probably all of them.
All, so, and I just want to make sure, again, we're not here to put words in your mouth. So when you say all, and I'm thinking...
Well, okay, I won't want to say all because I'm going to say the laptop, the phone, and the computer in the office.
Okay, so laptop in the RV.
Yes.
Okay. The phone, your
I
phone...
believe, to the best of my knowledge.
Well, that's fine.
Yeah.
Again...
I don't know if they actually all have them or
we're not here to pin you in a corner on any of your answers.
Right.
The laptop that's possibly on the laptop in the RV.
Right.
Possibly on the phone that you had on you, right? Your phone, not Randall's.
Right.
And then
I don't know about Randall's.
Well, yeah, we're gonna have a conversation very similar to what we were having with you when we're done. If he wants to talk to us, and then possibly peer-to-peer networks on the HP that's in the.
Yes.
Okay. And I guess that's what Agent Acock was kind of getting to.
Like a Tor browser or a Tor. We upload stuff for our cars and things like that. I've had a friend of mine that came and set up with file sharing, so we could do more encrypted type stuff. He just said it's safer that way. He got me onto it to be safer.
I want to make sure that we're clear. When you say Tor, my definition. There's kind of a
I actually don't know the definition, so I don't really want to...
The TOR stands for the Onion Router, which is basically the dark web and the deep web.
Okay.
I don't know if you ever heard of the dark web.
I've heard people talk about it.
Right, but then there's torrent. So two different things.
Okay.
Peer-to-peer, that falls into torrent files. So you have peer-to-peer files, which is software that you can download and you can exchange files with users all over the world. Tor, T-O-R, standing for the Onion Router, is the dark web. That's a program that's where you can surf the internet anonymously and get on all these different sites. So do you know?
I don't know which. I don't know. He said Tor, so I don't really know which one.
That's fine. I just want to make sure I'm not, when you say Tor, I'm not thinking dark web, and while you're thinking peer-to-peer or vice versa.
No, I don't. So you're saying what? So are you saying what? I guess I'm still confused.
In terms of the peer-to-peer,
he said you can download. I don't actually know, so I guess I better not. Not say if I don't understand.
And I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming because you said that they have peer-to-peer programs on these devices, that he was talking about torrent files, not T-O-R. Torrent, T-O-R-R-E-N-T.
Oh, I don't know.
As opposed to T-O-R, and there is a difference there.
So are you saying that is your question pertaining to which one?
I was just making sure that you and I were on the same page as to what you're talking about. But I don't think you're seeing the difference.
I don't see any difference as far as I don't know.
So your friend said that there's potentially on these devices.
Well, no. I have knowledge that there is something that says Tor on there, at least on one of them.
Gotcha.
And that has been. I'm just saying that was at his recommendation that I use those. And so and I don't know at what point.
Let's leave it at that based on your description of it.
The interviewers keep cutting Josh off while he is about to give damning statements and don't utilize the situation to their advantage. In this instance, it would be better for him to expand on his thoughts, but they continue to cut him off instead of letting him incriminate himself. Silence is usually an interrogator's best friend, as it leads to their subjects feeling uncomfortable and feeling the need to express their thoughts.
And what would you say the usage of the Tor?
I don't recall.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it more for the business or is it personal? And look, I promise you, we're not,
most. Okay, so I can't.
We're not here.
I can't speak to that because you have my laptop, you have my phone, so it's probably split, down the middle. The office computer, probably the same thing.
All right. And I don't want you to think that we're here because somebody's downloading music. We wouldn't.
So what are you here for then?
That's what we're getting at. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is somebody communicating?
We do a lot of things with Homeland Security investigation. We enforce over 400 different federal statutes. Immigration, narcotics, gangs, and part of the other stuff we do is child exploitation. So we kind of work with saving kids essentially. A lot of times. We'll find through internet tips that people have, downloaded child pornography, stuff like that. And
so is that what you're saying? Is that what you're saying is going on?
Well, so what we're saying is there is a possibility that there are pieces to this puzzle where we might be able to help save children. Okay? And that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
All right.
So what is the scope is what I've been trying to say. Like, is there something going on my devices where that's been something's accessed or something's downloaded or uploaded or something like that?
That's what led us here. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So what we're trying to do is hopefully find out exactly what happened so we can try to use that information to put some pieces of the puzzle together to help save.
Does it include, so did it mark this IP address? Is that basically what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So I guess in the scope of your investigation, is there going to be, you'll narrow it down. You'll be able to figure out probably which device or which thing, or at least know if it's any of these devices that are here.
Well, that's what you see all these other guys running around doing. There are computer forensic analysts. So like even if something's on a computer that someone might have downloaded and then deleted, they're going to be able to find it. They've been doing that. That's what they do.
Yep.
So, with that being said, we're just trying to get to the bottom of exactly.
No, well that helps me a lot to understand what you're here for. So I understand that. I respect that. That's good. So what other? I guess they'll do their work and figure out what they can find. So,
has there been anything, let's say, within the last 5 to 6 months between yourself or any of your employees or any other associates that have been on this property that has raised a red flag as to why that search warrant or federal search warrant might have been signed?
Not at all.
Why we're here.
No.
Nothing that might have been accidentally or intentionally downloaded or uploaded from any of these networks or software programs that we've talked about?
And not that I know of.
The trial lasted for 7 days, with the prosecution putting expert witness after expert witness on the stand to illuminate how it was impossible for anyone else to have been the person to be downloading the child porn onto the laptop. 2 of Josh's old friends testified of Josh being interested in the Linux system, specifically as it pertained to bypassing Covenant Eyes. The only other employee at the used car lot was questioned and didn't know the password to the Linux system, which was a password Josh had used on other devices, and every time that the porn had been downloaded, Josh had been the only person in the office. The defense fought back, trying to argue that it wasn't Josh who had done this, rather some anonymous hacker who was trying to make Josh look bad. They claimed that Josh himself wasn't smart enough to have done all of this, and certainly wasn't smart enough to figure out the dark web. He was homeschooled after all. They also tried to argue that since his cell phone and his personal laptop didn't contain porn, that obviously showed his innocence. Their closing arguments framed the case as a classic whodunit, despite the insurmountable evidence showing Josh did. The jury took less than a day to come to a verdict: guilty. Josh Duggar had been allowed to do whatever he wanted his entire life. When he was 14, he molested his sisters and got away with it. When he was an adult, he walked away from 3 major sex scandals nearly scot-free, with his family's support and continued help. And as an adult, he assumed that he would be able to get away with everything, but by the grace of God, he wasn't able to. There is no proper way to end this. The Duggars allowed their son to assault their children, the church elders took part in hiding this, and while justice was gained in this one case, it is worrisome that Jim Bob once said that plenty of other families had the same things happen to them, and it was no big deal. Thank you for watching this episode of Dreading. If you like this video, please hit the like button and subscribe, and we will see you next time.